Can we do the same thing out in Azure? 100% we can. We can have people, push the buttons and make the servers, and then pick up their application and move it out there. But when you guys get involved, they're wanting to necessarily say, I want my application to run there, but is there a better way to get it there?
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Manhattans Project. I'm Michael Gibson, Marketing Manager here at 10th Magnitude, and I am joined today by Jeff DeVerter, who is the Chief Technologist for Microsoft over at Rackspace.
That's right.
Very excited to have you here to be sort of bringing in one of the first episodes we're filming in the new year here, and we're testing a new space.
Whole new stage was constructed.
So we're gonna see.
Knocked out a wall.
Goes. Yeah. We had to.
Fantastic.
We actually had to, buy a whole office next to ours. It was interesting.
It's hard to get the lease signed on short notice.
Yeah, we made it happen for you. We made it happen.
I appreciate it.
So thank you very much for joining.
Glad to be here.
Happy to have you here. I hope you enjoy the Manhattan.
Thank you. I was just telling you before, it's a drink of my grandfather. So anytime I smell one, taste one, it reminds me of a good old Henry Wallum.
Oh, fantastic.
All right. Haven't really developed much of a taste for them, I have to completely admit.
That's fine.
But it does smell great.
Well, hopefully I help.
One of the big trends that I saw last year was we went from a time where companies were really afraid of the cloud. Oh, cloud is bad, especially as you got up into that mid-market and enterprise space. Mm-hmm. Customers were really paranoid about seeing their data get out to the cloud. Last year saw the change of getting my data out of my data center and anywhere else for that matter. And really where we saw at Rackspace, when we've been planning for and preparing for, is a migration out to public cloud, but going through private cloud. And so this, a little over a year ago, we launched a private cloud offering and have seen a ton of customers moving into that, but really seeing that as a stepping stone as they then move out more into straight public cloud, in this case, moving out into Azure. Because one thing that Microsoft has done so well with, and one of the things that I think gives them such a leg up is they have a cloud offering. Their cloud offering comes in two flavors. It comes in a private cloud offering and it comes in a public cloud offering. Now today, it takes a little effort to make those two act in concert. Now, as we move out through this year and then even into next year, as we see Azure Pack evolve into what's called Azure Stack, and we hit the same code base on private cloud and public cloud, and now customers can have stuff in the same data center, in their own data center, in a Rackspace data center, or out in Azure and move around seamlessly, right-click, move, single pane of glass. It'll be pretty amazing of a time to be in. But it still puts us at a place where enterprises are wanting data out of their data centers.
So how does that differentiate between organizations that are, not necessarily using hybrid as a stepping stone, but more see hybrid as sort of the right fit for their organization? Mm-hmm. Where does that fall on the spectrum between what Rackspace is enabling through Azure and what we're enabling through Azure, sure. and how we're working with Rackspace?
Yeah. So when we see a customer go to private cloud and truly look at a hybrid type of a deployment, we're not necessarily asking the question, hey, is this ultimately going to end up in Azure or is this where it needs to be? Because the architectural decisions really aren't going to change all that much. Mm-hmm. But it does help us give an eye to how we will engage with them in the future. If this is the thing that they're going to have and they're going to sign even a longer term contract with us, a couple of 3 years even, we know that that's really where it's going to live, or at least that core data set is going to live inside of that private cloud. But when that customer is really talking about transformation and wanting their application to behave, technical term, behave cloudy, but let's just define that. I always joke about saying that's a technical term, but it's just a goofy term.
Goofy terms are fine.
Goofy terms are fine.
This entire series is just one big long goofy term. So
then I'm going to fit in well.
Okay.
So an app that behaves cloudy is one that is going to expand, whether that's horizontally, whether that's vertically, going out into another data center, expanding out in resources based on demand, or contracting based on lack of demand that their application may have. So those are some of the core things that when I think of an app behaving cloudy. It also, an app that's going to behave cloudy is going to treat that infrastructure as just another block of code. whether I need to run a subroutine to go compute the square root of something, or whether I'm going to run a subroutine that's going to go out and provision 500 servers, it's just another block of code. There isn't a person who's going to go plug wires and lift and move things like we might have to do in a Rackspace data center. We're thinking about this framework that we can communicate with and out inside of Azure, very API focused, and now treat that environment, like I said, as if it were code, using Azure Resource Manager, even in some cases, to custom deploy, create a custom deployment set that will take this customer's custom application, but make it very much a pattern and a practice of deployment around, hey, go deploy it over here in an East Coast data center, go deploy it over in a European data center, go deploy it over in a Far East data center. And that's a big part of what we work with 10th Magnitude on, is helping those customers who want to transform really be able to do that, because that's where you guys have built your expertise and your reputation.
If you
and
say
that
so.
is, I do say so, because I've seen the work that you've done. It's fantastic.
Well, thanks.
And being able to say, here's this stodgy old enterprise application that does this thing. Here's the output, which, we need to remember that as we transform things, it doesn't necessarily change the destination. It just changes how you get to the destination. And so if somebody comes to a Rackspace, let's go back 3 or 5 years, 10 years, and somebody comes to Rackspace and says, I want to bring my application that we've been running or that we've just written, and we want to run it in your data center because I hate running infrastructure. That's been our story forever. And we are great at deploying physical servers. We're great at then virtualizing that environment, having world-class hardened storage behind it, and a network that has 100% uptime guarantee. We've done that for 16 years and have done it very well and built a great business on it and delighted thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers in doing that. But when a customer thinks about going to a place like Azure, can we do the same thing out in Azure? 100% we can. We can have people, push the buttons and make the servers, and then pick up their application and move it out there. But when you guys get involved, they're wanting to necessarily say, I want my application to run there, but is there a better way to get it there? And so you guys will write the code that will then make that a continuously updatable opportunity. So the CI/CD thing really becomes an opportunity at that point, because we're deploying that infrastructure as if it were just a couple 100,000 lines of code.
One of the stories that we continue to cover over and over again, because it's such a wide gap between how things were and how things are going to be, and sort of this point where we are, is that continuous integration, that continuous delivery model sort of frees up an entire team, where you don't have to worry about doing this entire version release every single time you want to put out an update. You don't have to make sure that you're sitting there and covering everything and putting everything into a package and testing the whole thing. You can throw out essentially a hot fix, as it were, or an additional function of the application, and just roll it right out, see how it's received, and then make any changes you need to make on the fly. I think that is, to me at least, in the time I've been sort of in this company and sort of like from this angle with Azure and sort of how we empower CI/CD, that to me has been the biggest point that I've been impressed by. It just eliminates this entire gap of development that I think was honestly one of the biggest hindrances in application development or software development, or even frankly even just storage. That was huge.
Totally. And it really, if you've been in this industry for any amount of time, and people start to throw around, you kind of bundle all that up and you can call it DevOps. And I struggled with defining DevOps and understanding what that was for a long time. I may still to a degree.
It's still rough,
Because when you put those two words together, you break those words out of what they are. Developer and operations. These are two communities you never let talk to one another before. Your operations guys, they're focused on one thing, and that is making sure this one thing runs well, and it's all the time there. We're deploying new stuff when it's needed. Developer, they're crazy people who write new code. Why would I ever let these two communities talk to one another? Because we put testers in the middle.
And
we put QA people in the middle. Now we've taken and we sandwiched them all up into a thing. And it's an outcropping of a couple of things, I think. You think about agile development. So now instead of this multi-month, multi-year life cycle of a thing or development cycle, we're taking that down to days or weeks. So the amount of change that can occur in there is much smaller, so it's more manageable. The other thing is the infrastructure now can be treated, like we mentioned earlier, like code. And so when you have a mindset shift of we have smaller chunks of stuff, and now I can take operations and throw them into the developer side because I have a cloud that can be treated like code. So it's definitely blurring those things together. I think those two areas, there's still a DevOpsy community and there's still a hardcore dev community, I think. But when those two work well in concert, you have the ability then to be astoundingly more flexible and more dynamic. When upstream sees it first, they go to a concert, they read a book, they watch one of these very intelligent podcasts, videos. We try. Yes, and sometimes we find our phone will ring and they'll say, "Hey, we want some servers and we want to buy some DevOps." You can't buy some DevOps.
No.
Give me 3 DevOps, please.
I can't tell you how often I see that. I run our Twitter stream, and I think once a day somebody retweets or posts something that says, DevOps is not a product you can buy off the shelf.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge distinction that people have to figure out. So how does
it's
this...
almost religion, right? It's a new way of doing things. Mm-hmm. It's all the stuff we used to have to do in a new way with new technology and new capabilities. Mm-hmm. But it's not I'll take 5 of those, please. Mm-hmm. It's not it isn't, like you said, it's not shrink wrapped. It's you don't go down to Best Buy and find it on aisle 15. Let's think about this specific to Azure at this point. And I think I want to start consuming Azure, and I want to use. I'm gonna create subscriptions for our different departments if that's how they decide to break things up. I know there are better ways to do that, but that's what they want to do, and they're going to run over the next year a bunch of different workloads out there. Oh, but wait a minute. What's the one glue, aside from networking, that has to be in place for these individuals who work in these departments on the code side to be able to connect with Azure and work with Azure, to be able to connect to those applications? That's being able to log into and to have an identity out in that cloud. So Azure has the ability to put identities out there. Enterprise, if they're smart, you are not going to have 2 different identities out there. You want to actually synchronize or federate from on-premises out into Azure. Azure has Azure Active Directory, which is a fantastic application service out in their platform as a service space. And there are ways using federation services or directory sync, or it's got a new name now. They keep renaming things.
Don't know off the top of my head.
To be able to get those same identities out into Azure. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things that companies sort of forget that they need to do. And then when they realize that they need to do it, there's sort of this, oh man, moment, because what that means is in order for that federation to work right, you got to go in and clean the garage. The garage meaning it's your on-premises Active Directory environment. Mm-hmm. I like to liken a company's Active Directory inside of their enterprise to everyone's garage. Your garage has remnants of every place you've ever lived, and everyone's Active Directory has remnants of every server that's been there, of people who have come to the organization and left the organization. Sometimes their identities aren't completely removed. Sometimes you have servers that haven't been completely or appropriately removed out of their domain. All of these are things that need to be cleaned up, and a lot of times we're working with customers who are global customers. So they've got these things stretched all over the world. How's the networking working between all of this stuff? All of it needs to be cleaned up. Once that gets cleaned up, then you can effectively federate out into Azure. And once you've done that, you've effectively transitioned those IDs out into Azure Active Directory. And then once they're in Azure Active Directory, they can be consumed by Azure, by 365, or there are thousands of other services out there that Microsoft has created connections for, like Salesforce or Workday or any of the thousands of them.
Yeah, I think there is a page somewhere on Microsoft's site that lists all the different things that you can throw up there.
Yeah, literally thousands.
Yes.
And so it gives a company then the ability to control those identities in one place on premises and have it transition out through all those other areas. And from a dashboard perspective inside of Azure, to then be able to know who is authenticating into what, and to control who can authenticate into what. You got an organization of 1,000 people. Well, you don't have 1,000 salespeople, and they all don't need Salesforce because Salesforce is expensive. So you can just assign the right identities to be able to log into Salesforce and use that, and then get charged appropriately from them. So they can also really help control spend as well. And then by putting some software on the edge of these networks inside their premises, you can see what else your employees are logging into that you can then rein in to use inside of Azure Active Directory, just so that you can control, when this person leaves the company. Because everybody has a first and last day with a company. So whenever that last day comes, you can ensure that they're not taking along their access to anything else that they shouldn't be. So when they get disabled on premises, they're disabled across everything. But don't forget about about how you're going to handle a true cloud-based authentication strategy when implementing cloud-based technologies.
So I want to thank you very much for being the first
Yeah.
person not from 10th magnitude here on the show.
And of 2016.
And of 2016, and the first person we filmed in 2016. Thank you for being willing
Got the
to
new set.
sort of cram into this little space. As
Yeah.
we're going to try a couple different locations, try to make this a little more fluid, a little bit more easily accessible. But I want to say thank you very much for being the first person to come in. I actually am, as a thank you, I'm going to send you back to Rackspace with a huge sticker pack. So that you can, because what I found is technology runs on stickers. The more stickers you have, the cooler you are.
Yeah.
Apparently, I found.
Well, there's one thing that's different at Rackspace.
What's that?
So at Rackspace, it's a bunch of people who are around their machines doing the job of keeping all of this stuff running.
Sure.
So it's the number of monitors. You need to come
number
down
of
and have a
monitors.
visit.
Okay.
There's one desk that I kid you not has 20 monitors on it. It's amazing.
What do you? I don't even know what I would do.
It just looks cool. It's part of when I get people
I don't know what I
tours,
would do
we
with
go by
20
this guy's
monitors.
desk.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Very cool. Thank you so much for coming by.
My
I really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
You bet.
Have a good one, everyone. See you next time.